Hey, this is Andre. Welcome to my weekly gaming update. This is now for beginning of the first 2 weeks in June because we have still a bit of June left. And I want to talk about Streefighter 6 and Diablo 4 and the showcases that we had so far. So Streefighter 6 was very well received. This time it comes with a single player mode that is very expensive. Never has something like this been in the game. And you can basically roam around an open world with your own character, challenge different fighters for experience, get new costumes, and so forth. And they also have new mechanics. Everything is working very nicely now in the beginning. People are very excited about the game. And it seems like a smashing success and really returned to form after Street Fighter 5, which had a lot of issues. And the network issues didn't have any kind of single player dedicated in the beginning. So this was not very well received. And now with Street Fighter 6, everything is going fine. And the next big fighting game release throughout this year will be then Tekken 8. Also, just released Diablo 4, which is a very hard contender for me when it comes to Game of the Year, even after Zelda that has released in May. So Diablo 4 is basically doing everything right. They changed the art style from free very drastically. So what they did there is go for a more deeper, darker, and more mature look in total, kind of reminiscent of the first two games, but now in full-time 3D. And you get a mount. There's a lot of endgame challenges, and people are very happy about it. Of course, there's the usual issues, network issues again, some bugs, but overall the story is great, the graphics are great, people are very positive about it. And the next season, or better to say the first season, will start around about July. They have one controversial thing about it where they said that they want to reset some part of the experience that you gain throughout the world, which is called as known as renown, and that could be very, let's say, very hard chore because you don't want to do this. This is like very small things like opening up the map again, finding waypoints, finding some kind of statues that you also have in the game, and there's like 150 of them, so you always have to walk around. So I think from the latest dev update yesterday, they at least don't want to reset the statues, and they want to show where the waypoints are, so you just have to go around, but still could be some kind of hassle. Other than that, the game seems to be extremely well received, and it's the highest selling Blizzard title in the years, so if not ever. So I think they did a lot of things right. There was also a huge marketing campaign this time. So basically you could even see this in the Xbox store, for example, where you have these tiles and for new games, upcoming releases, and recommendations. And they did something where they basically put the whole cover across 5 panels. So basically they bought all the ad space for the release. So you can see they really put some money behind it. And I think that was necessary because just a few weeks ago they canceled the Overwatch 2 skill tree system. So that was quite annoying for a lot of people, and they basically broke their promise on what they initially wanted to do with the Overwatch 2 sequel. So at this point, we can only hope that the incremental single-player quest releases that will come throughout the next months can kind of cover it. But they will also cost money, like I think $15. So yeah, this is actually kind of controversial, and for good reason this time, because the initial major part of the game will not be delivered, and now they're even charging on the smaller packages that will come across the next few months. Let's hope they're of quite good quality and that they come with everything, basically what you would expect: cutscenes, a little bit of CGI, a real story, and that is kind of also then linked to all the characters in terms of their narrative. So let's see, but it is something for later. And of course we had the big showcases this month. So basically we had Sony, that was end of May. Then we had the Xbox Showcase, we had the Ubisoft, we had the PC Gaming Showcase, also Day of Devs. Smaller ones like Grasshopper and Devolver. So this was all happening within a span of roughly a week at the beginning of June. And there were a lot of interesting things that we had there. So first of all, this Sony State of Play, which was happening in May, that was not very well received because they didn't really show any new games. There were no real surprises. There was a very big show for Spider-Man 2, which looks extremely great. And I think it was even a longer gameplay for about like 12 minutes. A few days later, they also released an image of Venom, how he would look in the game. So he was awesome. But everything else was either multi-platform or it was more like live service games. And these are very controversial in the gaming space because people are looking mostly for, let's say, high-budget single-player action adventure when it comes to Sony and the PlayStation 5. And we only saw Spider-Man and a few releases that will get on every platform. There was, I think it was called Phantom Blade. That looked very interesting, like a mix-up of, let's say, Neo Ninja Gaiden. Also with a very realistic art style and very cool animations. But other than that, no real news from the Sony PlayStation Showcase. So this was quite a disappointment. So then we already moved on to, let's say, the Microsoft Showcase, and that went much better. So first of all, I've also posted my top 5 from each show, and I just want to follow up on that. So we have basically Behalf of a Goddess, which is a new game from Capcom. And nobody knows exactly what it is. I think a lot of people in the beginning mistook that for Onimusha, but it doesn't seem to be that way. So it looks like a third-person character action game set in a very fantasy version of Japan. So I guess we have to see what's happening there. Beautiful art style, a lot of actions. I liked it very much. So let's see what's happening there. And of course, we had the Persona reveals. That was for Persona 3 Reload and Persona 4. So this will come out, I think, also in 2023. A bit of controversy about Persona 3 Reload, where they want to take basically the base game and want to do a remake of that, and not include the DLC that was done like a few years ago than in the original game. So this is quite of an odd choice, where they're not remaking the initial game plus the DLC, but just went for the base game. So let's see, maybe they reverse the decision on that. For Persona 4, that seems to be a straight-up remake. So of course, everyone is looking forward to that because 4 is absolutely a cult classic. I think Persona 5 is now the baseline standard for everything, but 4 was also like an absolute must-play previously. We had Hellblade 2, which I'm looking for very much. I don't think the showcase for it was very good. It was, let's say, very artsy. They have shown let's say, one of her, let's say, schizophrenic episodes. So you could basically see the acting and how she was basically talking to herself, speaking in this case of the Hellblade main character. But I don't think that was a really, really good choice for that because, it was dragging out. And that was a problem basically for all showcases. A lot of fluff, a lot of talking, a lot of ads, and that was not going very well in that case. But I'm pretty sure the game will be fantastic. Also, Keanu Reeves showed up at the showcase, was presenting the Cyberpunk DLC, Phantom of Liberty. And this seems to be some kind of overhaul for the game. So they will basically overhaul all the systems in the game to a certain degree, like with the police chases, some kind of the interface itself. I think there's also new ways to modify yourself. So that could be quite good. Looking forward to that. And I would recommend not to play Cyberpunk right now, but only when the DLC will release, which is somewhere around September. And that should be a big hit. And of course, for Xbox Showcase, the really great stuff was the Starfield presentation, which was extremely long, like at least half an hour, and it was even followed up by another showcase of the game that was not part of the initial show for Xbox. where you could even see more gameplay. The game will run at 30 FPS. Of course, that was not very well received by everyone, and I don't think that should be the standard nowadays. I think for Starfield, this is more like, let's say, the problem here is that the game is extremely heavy on the performance, because there are so many objects and so many things that you have to track in the game, that it's kind of understandable that they have to have some kind of, let's say, some kind of compromises. But I see so many games running now 60 FPS, and I'm not a fan of it. Let's hope that it is 30 FPS at least stable, so and that we can basically have a very smooth game, even if it's not running at 60 FPS. And other than that, the game looked great. You can basically modify and build your own ships. You can create star bases. I think there are about 1,000 planets in the game. So and they're not procedurally generated, from my understanding. So looked great. Todd Howard gave a personal note at the showcase, and it was also followed up basically by the in-house development teams that also gave an overview for that. So yeah, quite interesting. Next up, we have the Ubisoft Showcase. So there they revealed Prince of Persia. A lot of people really hated that game when it was presented and didn't understand what was happening. It's basically a 2D game in this case, more like a Metroidvania, having a lot of, let's say, characteristics of the initial first Prince of Persia that released like 30 years ago. So, and also the art style wasn't very well received. A lot of people think this is old-fashioned, cheap, and let's say the more stylized comic graphics are used to save on budget. But I think this was all more part of a marketing problem for Ubisoft with this trailer, because a few days later, people played it and were very much excited about it, and I think the opinion of it has turned around, that people have now a better understanding. I think Ubisoft also released another trailer for that, so where you can get a better picture of it. And you're not playing as the prince; he seems to be kidnapped, and you're playing other characters. Also an odd choice for a lot of people, but I don't think that was the main issue here. So let's see how the game turns out in the end. I think it's looking great, and looking forward to that. We had also basically smaller releases that they were promoting. We have the Crew Moto Fest. I really like this series. It's kind of an open world racer, similar to Forza Horizon, and this is basically the third game in the series. Then they showed off Skull and Bones with some kind of musical number and not talking about the game. So I think everyone is still concerned about, again, that they're even hiding it behind some kind of, let's say, stage number and not really showing anything. So quite an odd showing for that. When it comes to Assassin's Creed Mirage, there was a longer gameplay trailer. The game looked kind of strange and simple in some cases, but I think it's also part of the marketing that it is not working very well in that case. The game, when it was basically played by several journalists, was very well received. It's more a return to form of the older Assassin's Creed games, so with a heavy emphasis on stealth, and also basically back in the Middle East. And it seems like more what people would have expected the last three games to be. So I think overall promising, and definitely a good direction for the game. Because the last three games were more like, let's say, open world action RPGs, heavy emphasis on combat, and that was not really what Assassin's Creed is about. They also showed off Avatar, Frontiers of Pandora, and that is looking amazing, from my opinion. The graphics were great. In terms of gameplay, it seems to be something like a Far Cry Avatar game. And this looked absolutely stunning. It's first person only. I think this was quite a surprise, because everybody was thinking about an action adventure, because it is also done by Massive, the company that is doing the Division games. but they decided to go first person on that. So you can use bow and arrow, you can use machine guns from the humans, and yeah, you're basically playing as one of the Navi. So yeah, this seems to be shaping up very nicely. Very good surprise. And the biggest release at the show was Star Wars Outlaws. This is the new Star Wars game. Very impressive graphics. You're playing with a female hero in that case. Structurally, kind of similar to Jedi Survivor, but in this case, you're not playing a Jedi, so there's a huge emphasis on using blasters and other weapons, but no lightsabers. And I think as impressive as it was, the consensus on that was that most people not really know how you do some things in the game. And there were also, I think, letterboxes, so the game seems to be running in ultra widescreen, but with letterboxing. And yeah, also, let's say, not the ideal case. It works great for games like supermassive games, so basically the Dark Anthology series, or the games from Quantic Dream, but these are way slower games, and they usually are just dealing with, let's say, classic adventure style. Even if you run around with the characters, there's a lot of QTE events and things like this. So this is not a full-on action game, and this is what Star Wars Outlaws seems to be in that case. So real action adventure. Overall very good, very impressive, but we have to see how everything is turning out for that. And yeah, I think this was it for the Ubisoft Showcase. They also showed an update of some of the existing games, also promoting their live service games, a few mobile reveals, but nothing really extraordinary in that case. We also had a PC gaming showcase. This was more like a small indie show, let's say. When I give you just the names of it, I don't think you will initially know what the games even are. So there's basically a Metroidvania with Ebenezer Scrooge. This is kind of an interesting idea, also with stylized graphics. We had Sulfur, which is more like this kind of boomer shooter. We had Undead Incorporated, which seems to be a management game built around zombies. Nivalis was also an absolutely beautiful game with, let's say, a very pixelated art style, but in a cyberpunk setting, and also, from what I can see, first person. So very promising. And yeah, my game of this PC gaming showcase was called Dwarf, which looks like basically a Command and Conquer game, but more like you remember it from the past. So a lot of very interesting animations. The graphics are pixelated. So this is a very interesting game to look forward to. It was great to see this kind of action on screen then again. So yeah, this was pretty cool. So I can recommend that you take a look at these kind of showcases from the PC gaming side. And I think it was also presented by PC Gamer, because there were a lot of indie games and they got a bit lost now during all the other bigger showcases. Yeah, and of course we have to talk about the Summer Games Fest. That was basically the initial showcase in the beginning of the month. And overall, I think this show is getting way better than it has been so far. Of course, there was still a lot of ads, a lot of talking without anything happening in the background. So that was kind of annoying, let's say, and the show was very dragged out. I think if they go for a more condensed format in the future, you could look at the show being like an hour, and now it was like 2 hours. So yeah, this is definitely too long. Not too many surprises here. They also didn't reveal too many games, and they were following up on interesting games that are currently in development. For example, Witchfire, which is the new game from the Bulletstorm guys that also did Painkiller. So this is more like a medieval magic shooter, but you also have guns, and yeah, quite interesting game that I want to see. Then we also had a big trailer for Remnant 2, which I'm a big fan of. This is more like a third-person, let's say, post-apocalyptic fantasy live service shooter, kind of similar to The Division, but in a more, let's say, very, let's say, sci-fi Western dystopian setting. So quite interesting. It was much more spectacular than the first game that released like 4 or 5 years ago, which was kind of a surprise hit because it's a double A game. I still have the feeling for that in this case, and but nonetheless, I'm looking forward to that. But the show had, of course, also a lot of other games. Let me just check what we had there. So, first of all, we had Sonic Superstars, which seems to be a new 2D game for Sonic. Very cool graphics, very old school. You can play with multiple characters. This is definitely a big hit. Kind of reminds me more of Sonic Mania. There also seems to be some kind of ultimate moves. For example, with Sonic, you can split up into dozens and dozens of copies of him and have this kind of a super. So this game was extremely great, and I'm absolutely excited for that. We had basically the open of the show was Mortal Kombat 1. Interesting choice where they're basically soft rebooting the series now, because you can still see that Liu Kang is the fire god, like Mortal Kombat 11 closed out, and he's now basically a god. And this is also kind of the initial starter now for the story in MK1. So it's kind of a soft reboot. I think he's changing timelines or something like this, and basically the whole story will then begin anew with new characters. I think the most interesting feature that they have is kind of an assist feature. So they have a lot of characters from the previous Mortal Kombat games in this. But the interesting thing about it is these characters will not be playable, but they will only appear in assists. So you can imagine that it's like kind of in the DBZ games or Marvel vs. Capcom, where you always can call someone in for a quick special move, a tag team battle, let's say. And interesting. I hope that the characters will be available throughout the season because they already announced the first DLC for the game. I think Mortal Kombat will release around about September. So looks very promising. Amazing graphics, incredibly violent, and basically everything that you expect from Mortal Kombat game. So we had basically a small trailer for a Twisted Metal show that will be released in 2023, a TV show. I think it was very funny. It also had a very cool actor for Sweet Tooth from Twisted Metal, but I think overall it wasn't very well received. A lot of people were basically annoyed by the humor in the whole skit that they were playing there. So let's see. Yeah, we already talked about Remnant. Then we have Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. This is basically the continuation of the Final Fantasy remake that will release early 2024 with the little special thing that the game will come on 2 discs. So this is, first of all, a very cool marketing gag where you can say, okay, this kind of reminds us of the initial PlayStation 1 RPGs where they were so huge that they would have to come on multiple discs. I think Final Fantasy VII initially launched with 4 discs. So this is absolutely cool. And of course, this also means there's a lot of game there, or a lot of graphics. There must be tons of data that they actually need to 2 discs now for this release. It could also be for the voice lines when I think about it. Another highlight of the show was Alan Wake 2. What's interesting here is Alan Wake is now going full for a survival horror game. In that case, you can play as Alan Wake and a new character called Saga. I think the game looked great. You always had this kind of Remedy touch, this very, let's say, there's this kind of creepy atmosphere, which is kind of a, let's say, always a mix-up of a horror film plus X-Files style. This is always like this kind of SCP feeling that I get from the Remedy games. So overall looked great. I hope you can play a lot with Alan Wake and he's not sidelined by the new character, but looked extremely great. Now, one thing that I forgot about the Xbox Showcase, of course, they also showed Fable. I think Fable in that case was, let's say, it was kind of characteristic for the whole show, where they promised a lot of gameplay, but they were just showing CGI, and this was also, let's say, a very disappointing showcase for Fable. I think the humor is there, but it was more like a 4 or 5 minute CGI trailer with just seconds of gameplay, where I'm not even sure if it is actually gameplay in that case. So this was kind of odd, and I also don't see a release date for that game. So yeah, I think no one is basically a real winner for this, let's say, non-free showing in that case. I think Ubisoft had a great show in terms of that they showed a lot of gameplay, but the show itself was very odd, let's say, and they also had a lot of CGI in it. The Xbox Showcase had a lot of interesting games, but no real surprises, but at least they showed off cool things. And the Sony Showcase, there was much too much emphasis on this kind of the live games. So overall, I think this was a big disappointment because people were looking really forward to it because there hasn't been some kind of big showcase for Sony in about 2 years. We only had this kind of directs, so basically the state of plays, and yeah, this was kind of a disappointment. But yeah, overall, I think we got a very cool selection of games. A lot of things will come out this year. A lot of things also don't have release dates, like for example Dragon's Dogma 2, which is of course a game I'm looking forward to very much. Then we had also basically cancellation, not cancellation. We had a basically, yeah, what would we call it? It's kind of yeah, a restart or overhaul of development for Pragmata. There was a very interesting game shown by Capcom about 3 years ago. It had some serious Death Stranding vibes, but yeah, doesn't seem to go anywhere at the moment. I think they really have to rethink what they're doing there. I hope this doesn't become another, let's say, a deep down situation for Capcom. Yeah, speaking of, we also had the Capcom Showcase, but there wasn't really anything other than the games that were already out, or so basically the known quantities in that case. Yeah, I hope this was informative for you. I think I will also do something like this at end of June. A lot of things will happen until then. We will have Final Fantasy 16 in that case. The demos are out right now. And the save progress will be converted into the full game. So take a look at that. It will release around about the 26th, I think, of June. And yeah, there is a lot of interesting things coming up in June as well, and July. There is a lot of games releasing this year, so we have to look forward to that. Yeah, and yeah, small thing in the end. An interesting game that was also shown off to a lot of journalists now and YouTubers was Immortals of Avium. This seems to be like an Xbox and PC exclusive. It's yeah, you can imagine it's like Doom with magical weapons. The game seems to be, let's say, very vanilla or has no real character. So a lot of people were disappointed by the stories and the presentation, but of the story. But the game itself looks amazing, like a lot of fun. So very good graphics, very interesting weapons, because they're basically adapting real life weapons into magical weapons. So basically assault rifles, snipers, but becoming fireballs and things like that. So I'm still looking forward to it. Unfortunately, it won't be in the Game Pass in the beginning, but from what I have experienced in the last few years, this is like a very hot candidate coming to Game Pass. Yeah. Speaking of games for the Game Pass, maybe we'll see Gollum there. Of course, this has been a super disappointing game for everyone. And yeah, let's see. Maybe when it comes to Game Pass, I give it a chance, but I don't want to spend any money on it for the moment. Yeah, then thanks for listening, and looking forward to meet you again. End of June, beginning of July. Okay, have a nice day, and best regards from Hamburg.